Right, so if you've seen the last video, you know we've struggled a lot with getting this head gasket to seal. It's just constant issue after issue. Yeah, so what's happened since the last one was I got the head off, took everything apart. I checked that the block and the head were flat to see if maybe I'd warped it. We found the reason it wasn't sealing was the exhaust manifold and the block were touching, and it was stopping the head gasket clamping down completely. So I've sorted that. I just filed down the exhaust manifold so it doesn't touch anymore, and I then checked the head was flat because I was worried I'd warped it, because you think if you bolt all those studs down and there's something holding it off that it just might put a kink in the head and it wouldn't be flat anymore. I even took it to the machine shop because I didn't trust myself to do it right, and they said yeah, it's still flat and it's all okay. So that was grand, and I bought new head gaskets. So I bought a couple to try. I wasn't able to get a composite head gasket for it, so I ended up buying an L-ring metal head gasket. This is what a composite gasket looks like. So I'm not sure if you can get a really good view of that, but you can see it's sort of like a fibrous material, and then it's reinforced around the combustion chamber with bits of metal. The metal helps seal the combustion chamber, and this helps seal all the water and oil galleries, and it's quite, compared to metal, it's very squishy. So my thought was last time when it wasn't sealing, maybe I just need to get one of these, because it'll have a bit more, it'll tolerate more warping or pitting in the head. So what I was originally trying to use was this, which is a multi-layer steel head gasket. You look, it's literally, so this one's destroyed. This was the original one, the metal one I was trying to use that wasn't working. You can see it's just multiple layers of steel all riveted together, and these ones are supposedly painted. The outer ones are painted with, like, I don't know how to describe it, like some sort of coating. Now this is the sort of cheap one I got in from Malaysia, and the coating's all like scratching and chipping off, and it's very shiny and hard. So when I ordered head gaskets, I got an L-ring head gasket in, and it looked the same as that. It was a multi-layer steel one, but the outside had this sort of like soft, dull, like almost a greasy type of coating. So I had higher hopes for that, and I cleaned the living daylights out of the block. I'd sort of checked the block with a steel ruler, and then shone a light behind it to see if I could see any gaps. And I could see just in the middle of the block there was a tiny gap. I think it's about 2 thou or 0.05 mil. Now, this may be controversial, because I know a lot of people would probably say this needs to go to a machine shop. So it's a cast iron block, it's not an aluminium block. Definitely I wouldn't do this with an aluminium one. But when I saw there was that 2 thou gap in the middle, I got this, which is for doing body work, sanding. It's actually quite an old 800 grit piece of sandpaper on it, just velcros on. And I just started sanding just across the block, tried to be very consistent and very even in terms of pressure, and I also sprayed the whole block down with WD-40, so you can see this is kind of greasy. And the goal was, I didn't actually want to scratch the block or sand down, I was just getting the very last bit of the old gasket material off, sand it down. I did actually do it for quite a while, until the block looked like a mirror. I placed my metal ruler on it, put the light behind it, got down, how do we look underneath, and it looked perfect. So between the exhaust manifold, getting the block like not mirror finish, but just not far off, and the better head gasket, I think we're in a good place now. And now if I look under the exhaust where it used to leak out of, there's no leaks, and I've got it sat full of water, so that's very hopeful. I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I wanted to have an oil pressure gauge. So initially the car had this little oil pressure sensor, and what this basically is just a switch. It's got a wee hole in the front, which you can see where you go. There's a wee hole there. When that sees oil pressure, it literally just pushes a switch, and the light on your dash goes off to say, you know, the oil light goes off. Basically just say you have oil pressure, you're okay. But there's no measurement to say whether it's enough oil pressure. It's just like more than nothing, pretty much. So I picked up an oil pressure gauge with that. So it's a stack oil pressure gauge, and it uses a slightly different sensor. It's the same principle, but you can see that sensor looks something like this. That threads in, oil pressure goes in there, and that will actually give us a reading of how much oil pressure we have. It just lets me know, because if you've watched the series, we did so many changes to the bottom end and the oil pump. It's when the car starts, the oil pressure light is going off when we've had it running before, but I don't know if it's just building up the tiniest bit of pressure, or if it's actually strong and, you know, enough that we can run it without damaging the engine. Because if we're running it without sufficient oil pressure, we're just going to blow the engine again, and I do not want to go through this another time. I've got the engine back together. Hopefully it's for the very last time. So first thing I'm going to do is get this mounted into the car, and then I want to wire up the gauges. As I mentioned before, I want to change the wiring of the gauges that are in the car. So currently we've got a wideband boost gauge. That's why I have this little triple thing. So I have boost gauge, oil pressure, wideband, and I want to wire them all up just to a little switch, so I can just basically turn them on and off as I need. Means instead of having to have the ignition on, I can turn it on when the car's off. I can turn it off when the car's off, and I just think that'd be a lot cleaner. First thing I need to do is get the oil pressure sensor mounted up, and to do that I have this little guy. So this is just a T-piece. It's all 1/8 inch in PT. So this screws into the block where the original sensor went, and then just because of space restrictions, I can thread the original sensor onto the end, and then the sensor on the side, and it'll just sit up against the block like that. And then it allows me to just plug this into the factory plug, so my oil pressure light still works, and then I can wire this into my new gauge and get an actual reading. It would be nice if my gauge had like an oil pressure light wire on it, so I could just completely replace the old switch. But sure, we'll run with this and see how we get on. So first things first, need to install the T-piece on the side of the block, sensor in, put the wire back to the original switch, and run a wire from this. I'm a little worried about this because it's going to be sitting right underneath the exhaust manifold, so fingers crossed this doesn't get too hot and break. You can see I've got the wire in there. I basically just put it in a braided vacuum hose to try and protect it, because we've got the turbo right there, It's just in here, so I'm very worried about it. But yeah, the wire just comes up here. It goes under the intercooler. And then, yeah, pops out there and goes back down into a grommet there. I need to tidy all that up, but I sort of need to clean up old wiring for the other gauges, and I want to do that first. So we'll get in the car and start pulling bits out and get all the gauges wired up right. Off. So two like that. Perfect, so that's it off. Okay, so I've got the 3 gauges in, and I've got them wired up in the back, literally just to your power and ground. I'll twist it together. I'm gonna put a wee bit of solder on these just so it doesn't build up too much resistance. And I've got these wee like splitter things, so this is power, but this is also power for the light, and then ground for the lights, and connect those nice and easily, and it cleans the spit up a bit. So that's, I think, about as clean as I'm going to get it. So I just need to plumb the vacuum line in there and then run the signal to there, plug that in, and the gauges are done. Hopefully they work well. But yeah, just going to throw some solder on that, because I've literally just twisted a whole load of wires together, and I'm worried it'll just cause resistance or per connection, unless if it's full of solder, you know, it'd be a lot better. Same for the ground. And then this is the wideband signal for an ECU, but that's not used. So we've got the gauges all wired up, ready to go in there. But the problem is the radio that was in the car is a double-din Pioneer. So I gotta do a little bit of steeling. See, I got a singled in Sony Bluetooth in here. So I take this trim off, I should be able to get that out. I've got the little sensor for the alarm here. Not sure what I'm gonna have to do about that. But first thing first, we can get this panel off, get the radio out. Yeah, so got the radio in the open. Let's test, see if it works. I just put the wee security thing there, the wee ultrasonic sensor. It's a bit of a shame because we used to have it hidden in here, which was nice. It was sort of out of the way, and it's a bit more ugly, but what are you gonna do? It's not a show car at the end of the day. Oh. Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, so I've got everything back together. Cleaned up all the wiring and everything, so it's not too bad. You can sort of see a couple of wires poking out there. But everything's right. I haven't actually tested to see if it works because I haven't put the battery in yet. There's a few more things I need to do, but I sort of I've at least got it in place. If I need to pull it out, it's not hard. You just pull this off, 4 screws, and it all falls out. Just got a wee singled in Sony that was in the coping, put in. Yeah, looks good, so I'm just going to clean up all this crap. And then the next thing that needs doing on the car before we try and start it is we need to drain all the oil out, because just loads of crap got in it. And then I want to do another compression test to see how we get on, and then we can try and start it. I'm going to need to drain the coolant out and probably flush it a couple of times, because so much crap and WD-40 and all sorts ran down the sides of the block when I was cleaning it. Yeah, so we got the wee wire running there for the oil pressure sensor. So hopefully it all works good. Yeah. I need to also reconnect that wire, but it'll be grand.